also a very conscious decision from our side from the beginning not to include civilians, because we didn't want to bear the responsibility of risking someone's life. The moment you film any civilian and put them in the movie with those leaders of the Taliban, you're definitely putting the life of the civilian in danger, and we did not want to bear this responsibility, so we said we'd try every single possible way to bring the suffering of the people without having to see it.
Hello, and welcome to tonight's Commonwealth Club World Affairs program. My name is Stephen Saum. I'm the Executive Director of Strategic Communications and Content, which is a mouthful, at St. Mary's College of California. More important, this evening I'll be your moderator for the discussion after the film. Now, not since the fall of Saigon has a U.S. evacuation proven so devastating and controversial as the one in Afghanistan. Hollywoodgate captures the immediate aftermath of the United States' chaotic withdrawal in August 2021. So now, without further ado, here's Hollywoodgate.
عجیب چیزاست. الحمدلله تو غنیمت مونده ایست هی کافراکی. بیان باید بید باشم.
کامرامین با هم دلتا پاتی شی خیر.
ماسک ها قبل وس قبل شو
کار لاری را کلش جاسوسه چرا کنی چالا جور میشه این تیاره
یه چیزی بردم جور کنم که هیچ شما
من وقتش خانه است هیچ کس نگیره نه تا این دم هم اگه ایمایه کردیم برات نقصان نرسید حالی از این به بعد میرسه
With only my camera, I came to see in whose hands this country was left.
قسمت کرده بس کن اینا را بو بس کنش
Me, I saw what I saw.
All right. So now it is my pleasure to introduce tonight's guests, Shane Boris and Ibrahim Nashat. Shane Boris is an Oscar-winning producer, best known for the 2022 documentary film Navalny, which we hosted here at the Commonwealth Club. He's the founder of Cottage M, an independent production house, and is one of the producers and writers of Hollywoodgate. Ibrahim Nashat is an Egyptian documentary filmmaker. He's the director, producer, cinematographer, and writer of Hollywoodgate, his first feature film, which premiered at both the Venice and Telluride film festivals. So Shane and Ibrahim, thank you so much for being here this evening to discuss this sobering, startling, and very moving film. Let me start off by asking you about something that you mentioned at the end and the little bit of narrative, voiceover at the end, Ibrahim. Talk about the suffering of the Afghan people, which you were kept away from, and yet is very present the whole time. Can you say more about that, what that presence is? Because we do see snatches of it in the film.
Thank you so much for doing this with us, and thank you all for coming to watch. And Shin is also a co-writer, so he's not just a producer, he also written the film among Talal Derki, the other producer, and the other producer who did the movie with us is Odessa Ray. And we had a huge team behind the film that really made this possible. And specifically the part that you're talking about, which is the suffering of the Afghans, because I was hunted of the futility of the material for so long. maybe halfway through the edit, I was feeling like we're not going to be able to make the movie that would actually really make the people feel the fear of the Afghans. And it took us a lot of trials using the tools of cinema to try to make the story bring the suffering of the Afghans without having to see it. And this is the powerful tool of cinema, that you don't need to see everything, but you could yet feel it very strong. And with our editors, Marian Tour and Atanas Georgiev, we were able to, after so many trials and the producers, we were able to bring that to the screen. But it was also a very conscious decision from our side from the beginning not to include civilians, because we didn't want to bear the responsibility of risking someone's life. The moment you film any civilian and put them in the movie with those leaders of the Taliban, you're definitely putting the life of the civilian in danger. And we did not want to bear this responsibility, so we said we'd try every single possible way to bring the suffering of the people without having to see it. And I think it's known to all of us, the suffering of the Afghans. Women today cannot, it becomes too far for them to dream about education, because all what they wish is to just go outside and walk in the park, which is they are not allowed, or to talk loud and have her voice heard in public, which is not allowed. So it became kind of an utopian dream for them to ask for an education today.
So I know that you don't want this film to be about you, right? And and I think that's one of the very striking things about it, about how absent you are from it. Again, aside from the different snatches. But I think the audience here would be very intrigued to hear you both talk about more how this film came to be, and even it wasn't exactly what the initial plan was, right? You were initially planning to go even before the U.S. forces had left completely.
My initial plan was to film a totally different story, which I was not able to do it, and somehow the fate has led me to go into the place of Hollywood. Somehow, let's say by coincidence, and the story started. But I think that the strongest part, as much as I was very lucky to have gained such an access to make the story and being in the right time, because I really think if I went 10 days later only to Afghanistan, I wouldn't have been able to get this access. Being there in the right time very early has allowed this access to happen, but also I was very lucky to have had the access to the people in the industry that know how to create a story out of this material that we filmed. And the team we had were people that I didn't really dream to meet personally, and yet I found myself sitting with them in the editing room, trying to figure out ways of how to solve the puzzle of editing this film. And it took us one full year of continuous work together to try to finalize the story that came, that you saw. And the powerful thing that was happening to us while making it was the fact that we had all of the Afghan translators that were working with us. We were in 2 rooms, 1 room for editing and 1 room for the Afghan translators, and we were all going through trauma therapy. All the Afghan translators, we had a fund from Rory Pick Trust for all of the Afghan translators, the editors, me, the producers, the ones who needed therapy, and the continuation of the Afghan translators and the team with us, of them coming every day, revealing things about what they are facing in therapy, was somehow moving us all, and this has allowed the story to continue this way, the way it went.
And maybe, Shane, I'd be interested in your insights into this as well, right? So you talked about giving the shape to the film, because I imagine you must have had, over the course of a year, hundreds of hours of footage to work with, and yet you didn't want this to be a propaganda film for the Taliban, even though they wanted that. So how did you come to give it the shape that you did?
Yeah, I think for us, I mean, it was an honor to work with Ibrahim and this team, and I think we saw the footage that we saw initially. We could see the weapons that were left behind and the amount of weapons, and we knew in some ways that the story was going to be about the base and it was going to be about the weapons, but we weren't clear until we started editing that centering on the base, the film was going to be about the weapons that were left, the Taliban, how they would find the weapons, fix the weapons, and then threaten to use the weapons. And that became sort of an arc for us of the film. But also, whether, we did feel that there was something faded in the fact that the former CIA base had this Hollywood Gate designation, because we saw that in addition to the weapons that were left behind, there was also Hollywood-style storytelling and Hollywood-style propaganda that was left to the Taliban. And when Ibrahim was able to get access to them, we knew that part of the reason they allowed the story to exist was an effort to create propaganda out of the film that we made. And so while we were editing the film, we knew that we had to make a film about propaganda so that we could take that part of their intention out of the picture. And that became fundamentally important for us, recognizing that stories are weapons, can be weapons, and that the Taliban would try to use this film and this story as another weapon in their arsenal. And similarly, that the story that we all heard in the origination of the war and the U.S.'s intervention in Afghanistan, that story was also a part of this arsenal and a part of the machine that makes war. And for us, in the process of making the film, we knew that we wanted to tell a story about the harm and horrors of war, in addition to the specificity of what happened in Afghanistan with the Taliban.
Well, one of the things that comes through in the individual stories of both Mansour and Mukhtar, right? A father and a brother who have been killed, so the cycle of violence, and then the presence of the young boy, which is frightening throughout the film, while the discussions are going on about killing. Can you talk about the kind of capturing and understanding and seeing that generational cycle of?
I think Afghanistan is a country that hasn't seen peace in a very, very long time. They have had the Taliban now for 3 years. Before that, 20 years of invasion by the US and the NATO countries. And then before that, the Civil War. Before that, the Soviet invasion. Before that, the British invasion for 3 times. And the fact that the people has not lived in peace makes almost everybody suffering from PTSD, and that includes Taliban or non-Taliban. And there is a huge difference between understanding someone or humanizing someone and sympathizing with someone. Humanizing, we're all humans at the end. Sympathizing is a totally different level. And what we tried to do in the movie is that to make us understand what happens in their heads and where they come from and where they try to go without actually falling for their trap of propaganda that they wanted to do. It was a very thin line to walk in our edit, but we've had a lot of people watch the film while we're making it to make sure that it's understood from different backgrounds pretty much the same way. And regarding your point, it's also something we really focused on in trying to understand them. If you really see the beginning of the movie, it starts by the 9/11 happening and the decision to invade Afghanistan and words that were said by President Bush back then, "We're coming to you for harboring our terrorist group Al-Qaeda." And then you see the last scene of the movie, Maulana Mansour talks on the phone and says, "We're coming to Tajikistan. We killed your guys and we're coming to you for harboring our terrorism." So it's pretty much the same cycle of war that has affected the kids to fall for that. And then they are repeating the same cycle, and it's just a continuation of the war, that war begets war begets war.
So one of the questions that's come in here from the audience is asking about how the experience of working on this project has changed you and your views of the world.
Me?
I think it's probably both of you. I imagine it must have.
We can fight all day about who goes first and who goes second, please.
I think it changed my views to the world, that I went in with this mentality that there's only the idea of enemy, that there's one bad side and maybe there's a good side and bad side. And I learned through this process that there's suffering in all the sides. There are people who are suffering in every single side. pain is the same. We are no different, and the polarization and the warlords who are trying to convince us that we are two sides, that we're meant to be against each other, and each one of them is trying to gain their own personal benefit, and we're all paying the price of that. Afghans are paying the price of that. American soldiers and American civilians and families were suffering from that. And it's what I said, the only thing I could not move past is the obscene power of those who worship war and the pain that it causes for generations. And when we said those who worship war, it's those regardless of their color, religion, political point of view, ethnic group, regardless of whichever category you want to put them, and warlords are warlords.
There's so many things. It's hard to just identify one. What comes to mind right now is, we begin the film with footage that sort of looks almost anthropological, and we recognize that one part of the constellation of problems that are very difficult to solve that happened with Afghanistan in the decades and decades of war was a lack of understanding between peoples. And one element of that is the fact that we have the sense of one culture can have a sense of superiority over another culture because of technological advancements and because of a technological superiority. And we see in the film that Mulally Mansour can't do simple math, and yet he was capable of leading a group of fighters to defeat the U.S. and NATO forces, what are said to be one of the strongest technologically advanced militaries in history. And they were able to fix all of these with some assistance, but able to fix all of these weapons that were left behind. And you see this paradox between simplicity and sophistication, and how both of those can live in a person or in a people at the same time. And the awareness of that is a humbling fact, and it alters and transforms the way I see others, and certainly how I see others who are oftentimes diametrically opposed to every value that I hold dear. And that was a profound transformation after working on this film.
So I know one of the executive producers on the film is Bakhtash Hadi, who himself had served, his family's from Afghanistan. He himself grew up in the States and served in the Peace Corps, not in Afghanistan, but after the U.S. withdrawal, he wrote a piece talking about how it was a lack of cultural literacy on the part of the U.S. military that was what was a profound element of the failure. I'm wondering if you can talk about that some more, because I think it's very interesting that you brought up the idea of cultural superiority and relationships between people.
Sure. I mean, because Ibrahim never lets me walk through the door first, you can answer this question first, and then I'll fill in.
I don't know. I think his understanding. Bakhtash is way more aware of the American side than I am, definitely there is a lack of understanding, and this is one of the things we're focused on in our impact campaign. During our talks we had a lot of talks with decision makers, and we had screenings in the European Commission, European Parliament, and one of the things that was said to us from the delegation that deals with Afghanistan is that this movie has become something like the missing piece of the puzzle of understanding the Taliban, and this is being said by the people who deal with the Taliban. Yet they didn't see, they didn't see that, and it's really necessary to understand the others, because once you understand the one in front of you, you're capable of finding solutions. And in the beginning, I was really afraid that the movie might be humanizing, and because I didn't understand the difference between humanizing and sympathizing, and I really always see that humanizing is actually providing the fact that once you see in front of you someone as a human, not as an alien that you're afraid of, you know that they are weak, they have weaknesses like you have, they have drawbacks like you have, they have failures like you have. So there is a way of trying to figure out a reasonable solution to the situation of Afghanistan without having to legitimize the Taliban, but trying to figure out a solution to that. And there has to be an understanding from us in general that the situation in Afghanistan today is a result of 20 years of war. And this war was done with the highest promises that we're going to make your country democratic, we're going to set your women to be free, we're going to bring you free education, we're going to make your country much better. It was not made as if we're coming to invade your country. It was made as a big promise that we're here for you. And the end result is that we left you in the hands of the people that you actually had a higher power against them, and today you have no chance of standing to them. And if we look at the situation of Afghanistan and consider it as charity, that here we're going to give you something small because you're suffering from the Taliban, this is ethically wrong, because we are responsible and we have an obligation towards Afghanistan that we have to find a solution for that. That's on the ethical side, but also it's very important for our security, because in the past, when you just kept when the U.S. kept just applying sanctions to the Taliban and ignoring the fact that whatever is going on there is going on there, 5 years later of the Taliban's time, the tragedy happened. So we have to find a solution to be active today and not wait and be reactive at the end.
And I think that the scope of the war changed in the 20 years of the war. You know, I think it ballooned from a relatively narrow set of objectives that were presumably more achievable than the objectives that emerged in year 3 and 4 and then beyond. And I think that change represented a lack of cultural literacy, of understanding that there was a partnership for specific objectives, but when the objectives changed, many of those partnerships changed as well. But you know, there's a lack of cultural understanding between the U.S. and NATO forces and the Afghans, but there's also a lack of cultural literacy even between the U.S. government and between the soldiers who served there and the NATO soldiers that served there, with not understanding also the consequences of the war for the service people that were involved. You know, oftentimes the number is cited that there were approximately 3,000 U.S. soldiers killed in the war, but that doesn't take into consideration the tens of thousands of soldiers that came back to this country and committed suicide and weren't able to reintegrate into society. I think the number is what, Ibrahim?
33,000.
33,000 people. So when you think about the failure to understand the consequences of this action, and then a perhaps deeper failure was just to change as a result of that understanding, and to change the way we treat the people who risk their life, change the way we engage in our international affairs, and determine what problems we're capable of solving and how to solve those problems. You see that there's a lot of work to do in that literacy.
Well, you brought up the ethical obligation, Ibrahim. I know that's a point in conversations that we've had sometimes with, I've had with Khalid Hosseini, the writer, right? We talked about that in Afghanistan, say, as being on the front line of the Cold War, and then everything that unfurled as a consequence of that it was not okay to say, well, you know, we can't fix things because there was this obligation and the suffering that the people had endured already.
Yeah, but this obligation, you cannot destroy someone's house and build a tent and expect them to be happy with the tent. It's the obligation coming, not just ethically, but it's an obligation because we claim to hold the higher standards. We claim to be the ones bringing freedom and democracy and all of these higher standards. And if we are not sticking to that, and we just start wars and leave it behind and leave the country in this situation, especially the women, leaving them in this situation, is just ununderstandable. And it did not, what's also very important to say is that it's not a partisan problem. Both parties and the NATO countries participated in Afghanistan becoming what it is. They all worked together hand in hand for 20 years in making the war continue the way it is. And they both pulled out of Afghanistan, and they should both work together to try to find a solution for Afghanistan. And they both know that the war is not the solution. It has to be something else.
Well, I was also struck by, and want to get back to a couple audience questions, but talking about the 20 years, I know back in 2015 or so, the journalist Sarah Shays, right, another returned Peace Corps volunteer, I'll note, served in Morocco, but she was really raising alarm bells about how the U.S. was allowing corruption to fester and was actually amplifying it, and was becoming complicit in everything that was wrong with the governance of Afghanistan at the time.
Yeah, I think the politician would comment on that rather than on us as poor filmmakers. So
Yeah,
I don't know the answer.
We I think when you were there, it was clear that there was corruption in the Taliban regime and corruption prior to them with the U.S. and the Afghan national government, but we weren't able to. We didn't really focus on tracking that part of the story. Yeah.
But you do, and this, I want to segue back to some audience questions too. You do capture some moments of, right, so here over the course of the year, right, the Taliban coming into a governance role, but not able to solve some basic things like with getting the lights to work or the medicine distributed in time.
Yeah, there is a function. Yeah, I mean that was one of the most shocking things in the footage that we saw when, you know, you find all of this, you find so many things that the U.S. left behind, and the only thing that is focused on is weapons to cause more harm to more people, as opposed to medicine to help and heal people. And then you find when they find these weapons and ask the doctor to come and check them to make sure that they're expired, that no one does the follow-up job and they are expired. And it's fascinating to us because we see that it happens in the U.S., but it often happens in totalitarian regimes where when a mistake is made, it's oftentimes then just never talked about again, and that's its own type of corruption when there's no accountability for these horrible failures to take care of your population, which is the primary purpose of government is to protect its citizens. One of the purposes, I should say. Yeah.
So given that focus on repairing the aircraft in particular that you captured, one of the audience members wants to know where you're surprised at how many of the aircraft became operational. And also they're wondering if there were test flights before those dignitaries.
I wasn't allowed to see details about fixing because for them it was important that I don't film the unfixable one. It was important to film only the ones that they have fixed. They didn't want to look like they don't have unfixed things. But throughout the whole year, I never took it serious. And this is something we tried to convey really in the movie, how I was feeling while I was shooting. I never took them serious. I never expected them to fix things. And then we started to fix, I'm like, these guys are making a show for him to make him feel like there's something happening. And there's this scene when they walk together and he tells him, did you fix the Black Hawks? And he said, yes, sir. And I was like, okay, now focus on the B-35 bombers. And there's a little shake in the camera because I couldn't hold myself from I was just focused on not laughing at this moment, and that's why there is a shake, because I didn't believe this was gonna happen. And until the day of the parade, I was expecting them. I would hear airplanes, but I expect 2, 3, 4. And then the day of the parade, just seeing the transportations once in the morning, the Black Hawks taking people and coming, and it's many Black Hawks. And my focus is mainly on the Black Hawks because I've seen them all lined up unfixed, and then seeing probably majority of them fixed in front of my eyes. And during the day of the parade, I was as shocked as everyone watching this material that this was fixed. And I think they had some test flights. I don't think he would jump into their flight. Well, he would become a martyr if he dies in it. So maybe they went without test flight, but I don't know this.
So with mentioning the parade, I think everyone that sees the film is struck by the other dignitaries who were there and those who you mentioned, you allowed to introduce themselves.
Good company, huh?
Yes. And you don't have anyone specifically from China speak, but it's pretty clear that they're representatives from China because they're spoken of as well.
Yeah. So we have China, we have Pakistan, we have Iran, we have Russia. It's good, no? It's a good company. And yeah, we have also a story that's going to come out very soon regarding some of these guys, because when I was filming them, I expected them to be just some diplomats, and I was surprised that there are diplomats present dealing with the Taliban, but it turned out to be way more than just diplomats. So we'll have some stories coming out soon about that.
Interesting. All right.
Something to stay tuned for, and also showing the potential power of documentary to help further journalistic investigations and the pursuit of information that can help actually solve lingering problems in international relations and international affairs.
So speaking of that, I noted that one of the people thanked in the credits is Christo Groza.
He's the one doing the...
Yeah.
Here you go.
I see. Okay. All right. So that'd be very interesting.
Christo, the one, the Bulgarian guy from Navalny movie.
That's and he
From
was
Bellingcat.
here with Shane when we had the discussion here. Yes. So one of the things that I think is also interesting is, and a number of people have commented on, is you also see the litter. Just kind of the carelessness of taking care of the place that they're inhabiting. Just throwing a plastic cup out the window, right? The plastic bottle is thrown away, but then someone else is supposed to pick up.
It tells a lot about the culture, no? Because for me, you lead by example. You don't lead by throwing. So it tells the kind of leadership they are establishing.
Yeah, and I mean, I think there's just we intentionally left those parts of the film in just because we wanted to create this contrast of what is and isn't cared about in the film, and it's not to say that it is not important to focus and prioritize on military and protecting your population, but there are so many other things that are required for a government and also just as humans, like just the care for each other, the care for healing the sick, the care for our planet. These are values that that can't be imposed, but we wanted to show in contrast to what we hope they can be, how those values are embodied in Afghanistan today with the Taliban. And also, I mean, it also shines a light on our own shortcomings here. It's very easy to kind of scoff at that or feel superior to it, but hopefully that gaze gets reflected right back upon us and shows us that we have a long way to go as well.
So Ibrahim, again, I know you didn't make the film about yourself, and yet you were threatened, not directly, but that's one of the very, very clear moments at the beginning, right? If your intentions are bad, you will soon die. And you're certainly ordered to stop filming a couple of times. Wondering if you can talk about, were there particular moments where you felt like, okay, this might be it?
So I had with me this brilliant line producer and translator that was accompanying me throughout the whole journey, except for the first, maybe. He joined me around like day 40 of being in Afghanistan. And there was a situation that happened in his first day of work, and one guy threatened me really badly. And I freaked out big time. So at the end of the day, I didn't know what to do. I was freaking out. I looked at him and I said, Adel, never translate any of these things to me again. When they threaten me, don't translate. And the guy took it very serious. For the rest of the year, I was never threatened. Everything was fine. I was like, okay, it looks like I made it. Found my way around them. And then we started editing, and then every 2-3 hours, one of the translators comes from the other room and says, hey, come see this. Calling you with your mom, calling you with your dad. I'm like, oof. And then more threats. And we had to make it in the movie equivalent to the amount, like it's a 1.5 year. So how many, it's a 1 year of shooting. We tried to make it rational, like a ratio, I mean. So when Adel, we had to pull Adel out of Afghanistan, and now he lives in Berlin with us. And when he came to Berlin, I was like, Adel, why did you not tell me? There's so much threatening to me. He said, you told me not to tell you. I'm like, yeah, I told you if they're saying it once or twice, not so many times. He's like, show me what you have. So I show him, and he looked at this, and then he laughed, and I was like, what's wrong? He's like, that's only what you recorded. There's way more that was being said. Like, yeah, but you should have told me that. That means you're carrying all the pressure on yourself, and you're leaving me in the darkness. I'm not carrying anything on me. He said, I would put my line for you, my back for you on the line. And this is literally the Afghans. Afghans, when the US decided to work with them, they said, hey, we're going to come and make your place better. They said, we put ourselves for you on the back. We put our backs for you on the line. And then after 20 years, it was said to them, bye-bye. We are not going to make your life, we're not going to support you. We're going to support some in the beginning to show that we're supporting, but then really the numbers of the people that were working with the Americans and they're left behind, including the pilots that we saw in the movie, what does those pilots have? They are left in the country. Taliban asks them to come back to work. What do they have to do? They have to work. And today, even the fees to make an application for an Afghan to come here is really, really high for the ones who worked with the Americans, that they cannot even afford it. So even the process is becoming very bureaucratic for them, not to just to make it hard for them to come. And it's a question of when will this actually be solved.
And just to say one more word about Adel, he's truly a remarkable young man. He's 24?
22.
22, he's 22. And the way he figured out how to fight for his country in a way is pretty remarkable. To participate in this film, to be with Ibrahim on the ground, to carry that weight of all of the threats and all of the risks that were being thrown at Ibrahim and by extension him, and then even still today, as we travel with this film and in what is our impact campaign, he's with us as we're at the European Commission, and he's a part of our a part of our strategy of figuring out how this film can continue to improve the situation in Afghanistan. And it's just a testament to him. And one of the most incredible moments for me in this process is being able to obviously to work with Ibrahim, but also to get to know him and to share in the hope and the potential that this film can in some small way redirect attention to Afghanistan, to the suffering there.
Well, I think that's a very good note to end our conversation on. We are out of time, so thank you very much to Shane Boris and Ibrahim Nashat for sharing their film Hollywood Gate with us here this evening.
Thanks.
If you'd like to support the club's efforts in making virtual and in-person programming possible, please visit their website at commonwealthclub.org. I'm Stephen Saum. Thank you all for joining us. And for those of us who are here in our live audience, we have a reception just outside the doors. Thank you very much for joining us this evening.
Thanks.